Disney finally brought Star Wars back to cinemas with The Mandalorian and Grogu. But honestly, I spent most of the movie wondering why this wasn't just season 4 on Disney+. And that's the weird thing about this film, because there's actually a lot here that I enjoyed. There are entertaining action scenes, great creature designs, fun Star Wars references, and of course Mando and Grogu are still incredibly lovable together. But the more the movie went on, the more I kept asking myself one question. Did this story warrant a theatrical release? What's happening, everyone, and welcome to Media. If you enjoy honest movie reviews, rankings, and all things cinema, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. I've got plenty more content on the way very soon, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, you know what to do. Now, The Mandalorian and Grogu. This was, honestly, one of the most anticipated films of the year for me, because I am such a big Star Wars fan and I absolutely love these characters. The Mandalorian is one of the best things Star Wars has produced during the Disney era, and Grogu has become one of the most iconic additions to the franchise in years. And of course, Djarin became one of the most beloved Star Wars characters because underneath the armor and the action, he actually felt human. His relationship with Grogu became the emotional hook of the show, and it gave Star Wars a level of heart and sincerity that many fans felt had been missing. That connection is why audiences became so invested in these characters. And that's why I really wanted this movie to be special. Now, to give the film credit, it actually opens brilliantly. The opening sequence immediately throws you back into this world, with Mando hunting down an Imperial officer, and to get to him he has to fight through wave of enemies, while taking down multiple AT-ATs in the process. And honestly, it is such an entertaining opening for the film. It instantly reminds you how formidable Mando is. The action choreography is fantastic, the scale feels huge, and it has that classic Mandalorian energy where you're just watching this unstoppable warrior adapting to chaos around him. Moments like that genuinely made me excited because when the movie leans into the action-adventure spectacle, it absolutely works. And the movie definitely delivers on the full-on Mandalorian action sequences, and I remembered exactly why I love this character so much. The gadgets, the jetpack, the confidence, the sheer efficiency of the way he fights. Mando is still an absolute badass throughout this film, and Pedro Pascal continues to give the character so much personality, even beneath the helmet. The problem is that outside of those standout moments, the film never truly feels like a movie. And that became my biggest issue with it. The entire structure feels like a season of the show compressed into 2 hours. It basically is a series of events happening one after the other. Mando travels somewhere, completes a mission, encounters another obstacle, and then moves on to the next thing. And while that format works brilliantly for The Mandalorian as a Disney Plus series, because every episode can feel like its own self-contained adventure, it doesn't translate naturally to a theatrical film. This genuinely feels like an 8-episode season squeezed together. You can almost imagine and see where each episode would have ended. And what's strange is that if this exact story had been released as season 4 of The Mandalorian, I honestly think I'd be praising it a lot more. I'd probably be saying it was a fun return to form with strong action, entertaining side stories, and great chemistry between the main characters. But as a movie, the story simply is not big enough. There's no central villain driving the narrative forward. That honestly shocked me because for a Star Wars theatrical release, I expected a more memorable antagonist, or at least a major threat tying everything together. Instead, the movie just sort of drifts from one event to another without building momentum towards something truly epic or emotionally powerful. And because of that, the film lacks urgency. It lacks stakes. It lacks that feeling that something huge is happening. Now, visually, there are moments that absolutely look cinematic. Some of the environments are gorgeous, several action scenes are massive in scale, and there are shots throughout the film that genuinely remind you how beautiful Star Wars can look on the big screen. But then I found myself thinking, some episodes of The Mandalorian already looked cinematic. We've already seen this level of production quality on Disney+. So what exactly justified this becoming a theatrical release instead of just continuing as a streaming series? Because visually it looks impressive at times, but narratively it still feels like television. One thing I absolutely loved, though, was the battle arena sequence, because all of the aliens featured there are the same species from the holographic chess-like game on board the Millennium Falcon. Even the arena floor resembles the board itself. That is exactly the kind of Star Wars fan service I love, because it feels clever and rewarding without being distracting. It expands the universe in a fun way, while respecting the history of the franchise. Moments like that reminded me why I adore Star Wars so much. But then there are other creative decisions that really didn't work for me. The soundtrack, for example. At times, I genuinely thought the soundtrack sounded techno. Now, obviously, the iconic Mandalorian theme is still there, and whenever that music kicks in, it instantly feels like Star Wars again. But in between those moments, there's this strange electronic soundtrack that honestly feels completely out of place. It didn't sound mythological, it didn't sound cinematic, and it definitely did not sound like Star Wars. The visual effects are also a little inconsistent. The snake dragon creature towards the end looks fantastic, and some of the larger scale creature work is genuinely impressive, but then some of the CGI, particularly on the huts, looked surprisingly poor for a major Star Wars movie. There were moments where the CGI looked unfinished, and that's not something I expected to say for a theatrical Star Wars release. And then there's also a casting choice that completely caught me off guard. Why is famous movie director Martin Scorsese voicing a character in the film? If anyone knows the answer to this, please do drop it in the comments below. It's such a bizarre choice because all I could think of while hearing the voice was, that's Martin Scorsese. It completely pulled me out of the immersion. It just felt like a celebrity casting for the sake of it. And speaking of wasted potential, Sigourney Weaver barely has anything meaningful to do for most of the runtime until near the end of the film, which is disappointing because she brings instant presence to any sci-fi movie she's in. I can't think of a franchise that she's not been in at this point, but the film never really utilizes her talent. Now, my biggest frustration with the movie, though, is the emotional side of it. Mando and Grogu are the emotional core of this franchise. Their father-son dynamic is why audiences became attached to these characters in the first place. There's a moment where Mando becomes poisoned and Grogu protects him, cares for him, and eventually heals him. And during that sequence, I genuinely thought the movie was building towards a huge emotional payoff between them. I thought we were finally going to get a quiet, heartfelt moment where their bond really takes center stage. Instead, Mando wakes up and immediately jumps back into action. And that was such a missed opportunity. The movie never slows down long enough to let its emotional moments truly breathe. And honestly, that perfectly sums up the entire movie as a whole. It's constantly moving on to the next event before the previous moment has had time to properly land. What's funny is I recently watched the new Jack Ryan movie on Amazon Prime, which is also continuing a television series in movie form, and I honestly think that film handled the transition better. It understood how to reshape the pacing into something that actually felt cinematic while still keeping the identity of the show intact. And most importantly, releasing it directly onto streaming felt like the right choice. I genuinely think Disney should have done the same thing here and released this movie as a Disney Plus event instead of a theatrical movie. Because underneath all of my criticism, there is still entertainment here. There is charm, there's fun action, there's great world building that you would expect from a Star Wars movie, and spending time with Mando and Grogu is still enjoyable. That's why this review is difficult, because I did not hate watching the movie at all. In fact, there were multiple moments where I was smiling purely because I love this franchise and these characters as much as I do. I walked out disappointed that Star Wars did not aim higher with this story, but I also walked out smiling because spending time with Mando and Grogu is still entertaining no matter the format. I was really stuck on where to place my score for this movie. I'll admit it did change multiple times, because this is certainly not the worst Star Wars movie by any means, but definitely one of the most disappointing because the potential for something far greater was absolutely there. For me, The Mandalorian and Grogu gets a 3 out of 5. But those are just my thoughts. Please do let me know what you thought of the movie in the comments below, because I can already tell this is going to be a very divisive Star Wars film. And if you've enjoyed this review, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Media for more movie reviews, rankings, and all things cinema content coming very soon. I have already completed a full ranking of every Star Wars movie, excluding this one because it had not released at the time, and I will leave that linked in the description below if you want to go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.